Hey Internet, Kura here from QQMore.net. Today we are speaking with a legend. The person I'm referring to comes from Sweden and won with his team Orange Logo the second World Tournament Series. He is renowned for his warrior gameplay and tortures us on a regular basis with his new build creations, namely shoutbows. Thanks for joining us today, Techno Viking ROM.
Thank you.
So, how are you doing today, ROM?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I just got this new dark black watch here, so I'm all good. I'm all good.
Sounds like a fancy evening for me.
Yeah, it is. It just arrived, so I'm very pleased.
So, for a quick announcement, you should be familiar with the concept of the interviews if you watched the episodes before, but Rom actually came up with a very interesting idea which I would like to introduce in this interview. He said that it would be interesting to focus this interview around build crafting, how he would build a team from scratch with all the little tiny details explained by, well, the master crafter himself, if you put it that way. So we would start out with some questions as usual, very simple to get this going, and then go straight into build crafting. Okie dokie?
Yes.
So, first question. How did violent video games prepare you for your eventual involvement in Satanism?
I have no idea, my friend, no idea.
Okay, let's skip this. What are you doing beside gaming, and what are your plans on your future?
I am just on the side making some extra money, like translating at Bing.com or somehow helping out my friend's firm at a moving company, or they move furniture, etc. So I'm just helping out, doing some, sitting in a car for a while and getting some cut furniture for some extra money, or I'm translating English to Swedish or Swedish to English at Bing.com.
Oh, sounds cool. And how about streaming? I've recently noticed that you stream more regularly. Are you trying to expand on this in the future?
Yeah, I didn't stream for 10 days, but now I'm back again. It was just because I had some vacation out of my city, etc. But I will start streaming even more when it comes to Guild Wars in general. I'm not sure about my schedules yet, but I will definitely be streaming a couple of 3 times a week at least.
I'm glad to hear that. If you fancy to take a look at Rom's Twitch channel, you can find this as well in the description below the video, and I can highly recommend it if you fancy some good warrior gameplay. So, I would recommend that we simply jump into the meta straight away and talk about build crafting. Are you okay with that?
Yes, sure.
So, one question which is actually quite popular is, how do you simply find teammates? How do you find like-minded people? Many new players especially struggle simply with getting into a team or PvP players they can play usually with. How would you approach this?
I mean, for my part, it's been kind of not easy, but I've been in that high tier of, let's say, that high tier bubble of, let's say, 20, 30 people at max. This, so to say, bubble is, I've been in that for since like 1 month into Guild Wars. So I've kind of always had my kind of an easy way of actually creating a team. But it wasn't necessarily easy to get there in the first place. You basically have to, there's a lot of proving yourself, so to say. You need to measure your dick in a way. This is metaphorically. You need to show that you are a strong player, and that's gonna be very hard if you don't even you can't even speak to somebody on TS because they didn't acknowledge you in that way. So to begin with, like, I didn't have anybody, but I started playing, and I kept pushing myself into, asking the better ones that I noticed for duels, etc. And I kept asking them for tips, and then, or maybe not too many tips, because I was already kind of high in the Guild Wars SPVP scene from a very, very early stage. But in other games, for example, where I came in 2 years after the release or 1 year after the release, I was a scrub and I went to a high tier level, even became a pro in Heroes of New Earth, for example. Then I just basically found myself a sensei. My in real life friend who had Asperger's, that's also very good. So to say, yeah, it's a good thing to have Asperger's sometimes when if you want to go deep into something, but whatever. This guy was a sensei to me, and he taught me everything, and he was on that level. So that's by far the best tip I can have, is to find your sensei in a way, and just ask him a lot, and take after his movement as much as you can. And if you don't have a sensei or can't really get anybody to be your sensei, then I guess you gotta do it your own way and just keep asking different people and try to push yourself. Yeah, just keep at it. Don't go. Keep hot joining, if you want to play tournaments, and don't keep playing hot joins or unranked, just keep trying ranked, even if you lose and you get worse win percent or whatever, this leaderboard doesn't matter. What matters is for your future to get somewhere, right, and get a team. And the only way I think at the moment is kind of to rank you, find players that you kind of like, that you notice around you, that they have, yeah, they play something and they were strong. How I found my, Tage, for example, in my team at the moment, I found him in a hot join. I used to slay a lot in the hot join, and then once upon a time I came across this bunker who was bunkering a lot, way too long, compared to the others. So I started teaming up with him, and we have been now Guild Wars teammates or friends since 2 years, even.
That's super cool. I mean, hotshine, come on. I see that this is a popular question, but also a very tricky question for people like you, as you sometimes get into this tunnel vision. It's hard to, try to go a step back and ask yourself, how would I approach this again if I would go from zero again, But I think this is a very valuable approach, and I would definitely agree to that. So let's say I found some guys. And how would ROM himself build a team from scratch? There's nothing established, nothing set. How would you go from zero?
I would look at the roles I want. For example, the role I would want. The thing is that I can still play kind of a lot of roles, I think, but it's just that I am kind of, I am also given a role considering how people around me. Yeah. God. Where is this now? God. All right. Okay, we're back. Sorry, that was some alarm, no, but whatever. So what I would do first is to check the roles I want. If I am a Zerker player, or I love supporting, or I am that more bunkerish or the more offensive guy, that is the most important thing. Then comes specs, then comes builds. So let's put it. What is your kind of role? All right. Do you watch your allies more than you watch your enemies, or vice versa? You gotta find your role and know what your role is, and then you can start putting roles together. And currently, like, it depends. Always you need. Since Scratch of Guild Wars, I think you've always been needing both of them. You've always been needing bunker and offensive and defensive players in your team. But as I've noticed a lot with my time in Guild Wars, is that players, even if they have stacked 5 of the best players of their classes, it sometimes does not matter, because some players don't really combine. They don't have that synergy. That is actually the biggest deal when it comes to almost any competitive team game. That is the synergy between you guys, and that those roles that you need to kind of have set in stone for you not to, for you to live in your roles bubble, and then combine with your team.
This is actually a really interesting buzzword you just mentioned, synergy. I think, for example, you can take a lot of advantage out of theory crafting. If you know exactly what would matter the most in which situation, you can evaluate a so precise mathematical approach that there is a high advantage on your team. However, even though you could potentially, in theory, pick all the top players and put them into a team, synergy is very important and sometimes even makes up for example, comms which aren't so well working in theory with each other, in my opinion.
Yes, that's very true. Like, theory is only theory. I mean, you can make a strong team just by the theoretical level, of course, but I would say that the biggest thing, I mean, theory is always good, right? You need to do it, but adaptiveness and being able to change mid-game, you know, or adapt to a new situation that occurs. Maybe that wasn't in your theory book, or it's something new that occurs. That's so important for your team to be able to adapt to this situation. So that's where also mentality comes in. I would say that, I mean, I've had a lot of good theory people around me a lot, and I'm kind of good myself. But I think the biggest thing that makes a team, it's even more than theory. It's that adaptiveness, as well as your whole team's possibility of adapting to a new situation. That I think is, almost any team lacks this. Then a lot of teams have it, but not even one team at the moment, I would say, is a perfection at any of these levels, or at least not combining all of these traits that you need for the ultimate perfection. But that's also fun, right? So we know that there is always something to improve.
I don't want to speak in spite of the community, but if you compare the amount of dedication which is currently in MOBA games, for example, dedicated towards the game and maximizing the potential, it's a very harsh comparison between the current ESL scene of GW2 to this. So
yeah, it definitely is.
I definitely agree on that. It's very subjective, not really easy to put in words. Thing if you compare the synergies of teams to their theory value, but if these guys simply get along very well, it usually appears very more easy to practice, and therefore, you know, the skill level comes more naturally.
Yeah.
But allow me to go a step back and go over build crafting one more time. You said that synergy is very important, as well as focusing on the roles, for example. What roles, for example, would you balance out? What would you fancy in a team? What do you think has to be in the team in order to make it a valuable opponent in the current metagame?
At the moment, the easiest way, like as you see, we've been in this era of Celestial Amulet a lot, and it is cheese, we call it. Cheese is it's a very strong tactics, you know, even from the olden cheese mode that me, Zapdos, and Azron created back in the day. We played with Frey and Scyther, but this team was basically based on the Hambo, on the Hammer Longbow Warrior build. This build we played around, and I played especially with we played a lot with 55 HP monks, who are our only opponents. Into basically this build was basically the definition of cheese, because it was a role which was defensive, offensive, point holding, to an extent skirmish, but so it was kind of a superior class and spec in every way, or in most ways, except maybe invisibility and movement, but excluding that, it was like perfection to an extent. So we just took advantage of this very, very cheesy spec, and we played with two of them. Even you could play with probably 5 Humbles back in the first pre-patch days. And yeah, that was the cheese mode we made for everybody to be able to move wherever, kind of. You have a I mean, the ultimate superiority would always be for 5 guys to be able to move wherever, whenever. It doesn't matter who reinforces, it doesn't matter anything, because wherever the fight is, you will have kind of an upper hand because of what you are playing. But now we come in today, for example, we have vampirism runes, we have a nerfed Hambo, to shreds, kind of, and I wouldn't myself prefer using a Hambo. I'm not saying that Hambo doesn't work, but currently it's like a CC class as Hambo. It is kind of like a rifle engineer, but the rifle engineer has more support to his team. He has more sustain. He has more cleave even. Yeah, kind of more cleave, and then it's basically a 2.0 Hambo at the moment. It's like the old Hambo a bit, I would say, that engineer. So I would always put in a cheese engineer, a celestial engineer. And then I would and this I label as offensive cheese. I label the engineer as offensive cheese.
Basically, as far as I understand this, I'm trying to get the core of your idea, the skeleton, if you put it that way. You would try to build a team on the idea of trying to get the advantage out of every mechanic out of the game. For example, if the whole team plays something melee and you could use something which is, I don't know, range.
Yeah,
you could potentially put in a mesmer to simply get the stealth out of the mechanics, which you could potentially use if you are playing not with a thief or something which could, you know, give you stealth or something like that.
Yeah, I mean the basics. What I am only at the brink here, but I'm gonna tell you about the triple cheese. It's or the cheese itself. Basically how I label it. It's gonna be a lot of cheeseburger now, no, but a lot of mentioning. My God, this beep beep sound. Okay, so this. God. This is so retarded, but whatever. Fuck the alarm for now.
I'm not going to cut that out.
Yeah. So we have the offensive cheese. That is rifle engineer or engineer overall. It's a more offensive version of the celestial amulet. Then you have the two defensive ones. That's the shout warrior in the current meta. That's the shout war. It is the elementalist, the DD/staff elementalist. Those are Shout Warrior, DD, and Staff Elementalist, Celestial Amulets. That's specs I label as defensive cheese. And then you have then the offensive cheese, the engineer. Usually in a team, let's put it simply, you have 3 cap points. If you hold 2, you win. Yeah. So if you usually want to have 1 defensive cheese in each of these team fights, they are kind of considered bunker. Then of course we have the bunker guard, who is even more bunker, but that's not a cheese. That's a bunker only. So once you use these cheesy bunkers, then I would suggest, if you're new to the game, or you have been around but you want to create something, I would say that the easiest way would be to stack cheese. I will go further with more composition choices and other gameplays, but this is what I recommend for most people, especially newcomers. I would always recommend playing double cheese. Double defensive cheese, you use an LE or even double shout warrior, and then you have an LE with that, and then 2 Zerkers and a thief always, and then maybe have a mesmer thief combo, or use a mesmer, or use a thief DPS guardian like the olden orange logo roster. Our team, if you know, we roll LE. This is one of our compositions: LE, shout warrior, engineer, and thief DPS guardian. This is a very basic, strong line. It's a strong line. No matter what you face, you still have a shot against most. Of course, there are some counters in some ways that I still won't tell you, but there are always gonna be counters to kind of everything. So I would still suggest this cheesy version only because it has, so to say, less counters, or at least not as strong counters towards what you are playing.
Just to sum this up, so you're basically saying, first of all, for especially new players, it's always a good thing to, you know, look meta builds up at meta battle and get a grip on what is currently played in the meta game. And this sometimes classifies as cheese builds and is simply a solid starting point for them, so that they have less wiggle room to make something wrong, because building a team, after all, is a bit tricky.
Yeah.
Furthermore, you say, was that so far right?
Yeah.
So furthermore, you say it's always a good thing to have a bit of both sides. You say defensive is extremely important. Doesn't have to be a bunker, as far as I understood. A pure bunker, you can play something which is simply tanky, for example, double dagger elementalist or shout bow. You don't have to have a classical bunker, for example, guardian in your team. However, you should also include something like Zerkas, for example, Mesmer and Thief. You could potentially do that. Or as you did, I think you played with Tage as a Zerka, Guardian, and I think the Thief was also
a thief. Yes, and that is that's our WTS roster. But it's also, you must also look at it this way, that we basically fought. We didn't care if we fought some other composition. We maybe would wish we used something else. We didn't think of that. We think of who are we gonna face. Who is our opponents? Even if we were to lose to one team here, okay. Even God, this one it's on off as well. I don't know. It has schizophrenia. This one. This is ridiculous. I'll throw it in the wall soon. But yeah, basically we make our strategies mainly and the composition in a way for whatever we believe that we are gonna face in X finals or such. Then of course we may go harder on a monthly tournament. Of course the hardest on WTS. I mean we have struggled a lot through different things, but it is mainly, I think, because we try a lot. We have probably tried 4 or 5 different specs. Let's say we use 4 or 3 specs always, or 2, 3 specs always, and then we even we try different stuff a lot, and our only chance of trying different stuff is kind of in weekly tournaments or even monthly tournaments. So even if we were to lose, we keep every single script in our books, so we remember what happened in what situations and how we feel about it. Because you can't just say, a lot of people are wondering why did you lose here and there. It's about day form, and B, it's about what you play and what you are facing. It's not always about, this team is now the best, they should beat everybody. It's never gonna be like that, not in any single game, to be honest. Because if you truly want to keep up winning the biggest stuff, I believe that trying, and especially in Guild Wars, multi-classing is something that most teams in the history even of Guild Wars have been lacking a lot. So I believe that multi-classing is the ultimate superiority. Then it's a lot kind of hard to pull it off sometimes, because it may not be your main classes or you didn't use that gameplay enough, but if you don't try, you will never find out.
There was some time ago, I think, some controversy and players switching between classes in tournaments, but it's actually a very common theme if you compare this, for example, again to MOBAs, to exactly pick a class on the understanding that it performs better against another setup.
Yes.
So what you're basically summing up is, first, if you have the possibility, if you want to do this, try to explore other classes. And speaking about build crafting in general, there is no 100 correct approach you could share with us. It's simply a lot of trying out. There are meta builds out there which you can use to orient on. However, if the synergy is okay with that, if the people can perform with that well, is something you simply have to try out, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Theory is only theory. Like, I mean, for example, the shout bow in a meta where warrior was kind of slightly dying, people stopped using it, and or you were still on the hambo. I tried ranger. I tried to fit the role of the pre-patch hambo that was nerfed. That role I would still have used an engineer during this, but this was during TCG time, so we still had a bunker guardian and we had a mesmer 100%. And an ST thief. So we were very stuck, very stuck in a certain gameplay, which was kind of Stone Age.
And I really wanted to swap this strategy and swap this idea to be able to have a much more fluent and adaptive team, so to say. And yeah, that's why I cut loose from TCG, because I had these strict pillars that I had to follow. And yeah, that's why I made, with my current teammates, the orange logo. Mainly for that adaptiveness.
I would, however, though, suggest that we do a quick break with some music playing, and then we will follow up in a few minutes with part 2. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So, we are back from our break. We ended the first part by talking about how to approach build crafting, how to set up our builds. And I would suggest that we go a bit deeper into the meta and discuss the roles in itself. You wanted to start with Zerker, is that right?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
As I said before the break, I was talking about the cheats and the defensive and the basics of the composition, etc. But there is, as I said, that was that was basically my suggestion for new teams. That doesn't exclude that you can't run triple Zerker or a much more offensive lineup either, because I still believe that if you watch the NA and Abjord, you know, they have swapped to a power Necro and Thief, DP Thief and DPS Guardian. There you have a strong triple Zerk. They use Engineer and Shard Warrior. So they basically have offensive cheese, only one defensive cheese, and then triple Zerker. I would label DPS Guardian as a defensive Zerker. Defensive cheese Zerker. I labeled them basically out of a perspective, so you can easier try to see what you can play around with. So basically the current classes that I would play around with is Thief. I wouldn't recommend SD Thief, but SD Thief is a cheesy Zerker. It's a defensive Zerker. You have offensive and defensive Zerkers. The two offensive Zerkers, that's DP Thief and Mesmer Shatter. Those are the most offensive. I would label them the most offensive Zerkers. You can stack these two. Stacking a third with this may be kind of dangerous in the way of it's kill or die. If you die, they can snowball easily because you can't bunker anything. But if you kill, you can snowball very fast because you have such offense. So it's much more risky playing a triple Zerk and with much more offensive Zerkers. But then we have the DPS Guardian. We have the Power Ranger, and we have the Zerker Warrior as well. All these are more to the defensive Zerker. I would put maybe the Power Ranger into a middle ground between offensive and defensive, because it's kind of easily trained still in a way, but still not as easily trained as a Power Necro, for example. The Power Necro, I don't have that too much experience of it. I know it has insane damage, and I know it can be trained insanely easy without it having stability, etc. So CC kind of locks it down. But if you find players and you love this role of offense, don't be afraid to try it as well. But just know the risks of it, that it can backfire very, very fast because you can't bunker anything, and etc. But yeah, that's kind of a fast
if I'm going to distill what you said into again single core idea down, I would describe this still as you're trying to go for all benefits of the specs you could put in there. Zerker is a very viable and very reasonably spec you should definitely take into consideration. If it's 2 Zerkers or 3 Zerkers, yes, you can play around with that, whatever floats your boat basically. And don't forget to put in some defensive stats. Furthermore, you separate Zerkers into different brackets, like offensive, yes, Zerkers and defensive Zerkers.
Just like the Celestial.
Yeah, and for me, I see a pattern there. For example, the defensive Zerker, for example Guardians, are very good at outplaying offensive Zerkers simply due, yes, to their sustain, blocks, definitely, blinds, whatever. And if we expand this on the raw idea of, you know, if the meta changes, maybe all what we are going to say might be negated over time. But what I see is that, for example, if you take a closer look at meta battle and read the build's description, you will always see a small bracket which says this build can be countered through X, this Shatter Mesmer can be countered through Thief, and for example off Guardians, okay? And if I take this into consideration and build my team around it, it would be a good idea to keep this in the back of my head. If I'm going to put in a Mesmer into my team, I might also want to take off Guardian into consideration simply to support my Mesmer. Maybe Thief to stealth him up or whatever to get the most out of it, because the Mesmer is vulnerable against these comps. Therefore, I have to have some class which will make up for this disadvantage, right?
Yes, definitely. And the biggest support you can give to an offensive Zerker, that is not supporting him with a bunker or supporting him with CC peels. The best support you can give to your own Zerker is to be a Zerker yourself and do as much output of damage as the enemy is doing to your friend. So stacking Zerker is always good versus Zerker. And then, as you said, very good, is that the DPS Guardian, for example, is this more defensive Zerker that is kind of a counter, in a way, to the offensive ones, the DP Thief and the Mesmer. But the Mesmer and DP Thief has something that nobody really can counter, and that is movement. Movement, nothing can counter but them, the exact same mirror, Mesmer and Thief. So the movement itself of these classes are such an advantage of the specs themselves. So even if they are countered by DPS Guard or even Mesmer have some hard times against a Power Ranger on Legacy, you still can out-rotate them, you still can play around the movement in another way. Like outnumbering the enemy for 5-7 seconds will win you that fight. Even if the enemies reinforce that point, as long as you are there before your enemy, then you already won that fight.
Indeed, sometimes the best defense can be gained through offense.
Yes.
If, for example, Zerker decides to stick at your Shatter Mesmer, you could try to support him with heals or whatever the Celestial come up with, maybe crowd control, but the probably easiest and also fastest solution is to peel him off. Simply focus damage on the guy who is on the Mesmer, and he will either go down or has to retreat simply because he can't keep the damage, can't keep the rotation up, and of course take into consideration the movement.
Yeah.
After all, I think what I really like about your ideas is, in this current metagame we are mentioning, Mesmer, for example, isn't that popular. He isn't even listed in the meta builds currently, as far as I'm informed. And still, if you take into consideration that synergy makes up for so many things, if these guys know each other in and out, this will likely not be the reason why the match is won or lost, simply because you have to get along just fine.
Yeah, I mean, a Mesmer always has a portal. There is no other class in the entire game that has a portal. A portal is a movement. In a conquest game, a portal is a very severe mechanic, and to be fair, it's gonna be viable always, this portal itself. As long as, of course, the Mesmer has some strong strengths, but it has with a DP Thief. It has a potential one-shot on almost everything, and if people don't play bunkers, you have basically Celestial classes that you are gonna spike, and they don't have that much toughness, so you have almost a one-shot. 80% damage on anything, to be fair, if you completely clean it and you crit, etc., with your DP Thief Mesmer combo. So I would never exclude a Mesmer, even if it's not a meta battle. Not at all.
But what would happen if we take this into more detail? I don't want to invent a new spec over the course of this interview, of course, but what is, for example, about traits, runes, sigils? This is for me a playground of so many supportive things. If you are trying to set up, for example, a new build, a new composition, a new team, do you take into consideration, for example, taking runes and sigils simply to support the spec on its own, or do you also take into consideration that it could potentially buff the others? For example, I could go for Runes of Mercy, simply to res up my allies, if I go for 3 Zerkers, because they could be so easily downed. Or do you say, I don't want to go fully on team support, I want the classes to perform autonomously on their own very well?
That totally depends. Like, I would say mostly you take the more individual runes, or rather the runes that, like, let's say the Zerker rune meta has been packed for quite a while. It's basically it's most precision basically you can get with another rune, I think. But it has the combination of power and precision. It has a ridiculous amount. So and you get that Fury proc, which is also a very good for Berserker boon, if not the best. So that rune itself is just a very strong rune, and that's why it is meta, and I would probably run it as well, but now we see something else, because we are not in a condition meta at all. We've had it in the past history of Guild, definitely. We used to have aids, rangers, necromancers, and engineers just spamming aids. We used to have this type, but we do not anymore. So in this meta, you will see a lot of vampirism runes, and vampirism rune is a very good choice at the moment, also for NGs, for thieves, even a mesmer can use it. It's a very strong rune if you face Zerkus, because currently in the higher tiers you will see Mesmer Thief or DPS Guardian Thief always do a Zerker as well. So Vampirism rune is I think the strongest rune at the moment you could use, and that doesn't really. It's not really. It's both, you know. It's offensive and defensive. It has power and it has a survive mechanics at the end. Like if you want to spike an engineer, you spike him down, but no, you don't, because he procs a vampirism proc, and this vampirism mist form, it is a stun break, it's a stability, it's basically everything, because you become a dome of nothing, and you can jump out of KD hammer fields of the guardian ring. For example, you can jump out of it, so not even a ring will kill you. So I think the vampirism room at the moment, in my opinion, is actually slightly too good. I think
the accidental save stomps you can pull off with that.
The accidental save stomp as well. And I think, and there are some other bugs with it that I necessarily don't have to mention here. But yeah, this rune itself, I am pushing for a nerf, I think, or at least put the stats of it into a defensive version, like maybe vitality and toughness, or healing power and toughness, or whatever. But I do not agree on Vampirism rune being a power rune, because I think there is completely fine for a Mesmer and Thief to have that extra precision from a pack rune, but I don't agree on them having a 3-second invulnerability / stun break / jump out of KD fields or anything that sets you up for a kill. Yeah, I don't think that is fair, to be honest. It also boosts cheese a lot. Yeah, so that's even just Vampirism runes itself gives you, gives me at least, I will give you the tip of running cheese even more because of this rune itself.
Yeah, I think being a Vampirism player myself, I would not really like to see it go, but I see where this feedback comes from, and I think there's definitely a grain of truth in there. However, this is a bit off-road from the question. What I'm wondering is, for example, if I think about my spec, I want to improve my build. You're basically saying, as far as I understood, if I think about using sigils or runes, I would always try to maximize the power out of my own build. You aren't really a fan of speccing runes or sigils in the idea of helping your teammates out. For another example, I could potentially use a sigil that could give me healing on weapon swap, simply to help out my other teammates. This wouldn't benefit my spec too much, but in the end, you know,
yeah, it would also have, like the current ones, if they buff them slightly, yeah, sure. But I don't think that, what is it, renewal, that we did these numbers long ago now, but I don't know how much renewal is, or the other swap. You can swap for health, but you also have to a certain radius that your allies need to be in. You need to be in a peeling area. Like, it's so much things that you need to do to, you know, for the sigil itself. And also, like, let's say here I can use this renewal sigil as a as a shout warrior, for example. But that little heal of what, 700, it can't really compare with even an intelligence sigil. It makes me crit 3 times in a row, and let's say I wouldn't have crit 3 times in a row. I crit only once of these and I missed twice. Just that single hand damage of the crit itself will be a lot more than the renewal healed my ally even. And I had to be nearby him. But it's these little things that I still think that the supportive ones does not really favor SPVP, this 5v versus 5. I think the supportive sigils are not really, at least not for me. Maybe somebody will tomorrow come with an idea for me or tell me something that I didn't know about or so, yeah, then sure. But for now, in my own craft, I don't see supportive sigils or runes in general as being superior to a more solo version of it, or a more solo strength. But even pack, it's an AoE boon give for your allies as well, so that itself is an ally rune, but it's still very, very strong for yourself.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're going.
Yeah, but of course then the soldier rune on the warrior you use, but that is kind of apparent because you use either 2 or 3 shouts for
that's quite obvious.
Yeah, it's kind of obvious.
So just to sum this up, you would potentially, if we generalize this, if you try to find a rune that's fitting to you, you could of course pick a meta build, but it's always a good idea to first of all make it somehow solid working within your own build. This could be, if you're playing a Zerker for example, you would of course favor to get the most out of your damage. That is quite obviously. The other thing is, for example, shout bows. If the rune simply gives you a nice bonus if you use shouts, that's also something you would like to take into consideration. However, we can't really generalize these things. As you said, there might be some exceptions, but if you really want to go deep into the meta, you would probably end up with calculations. If we face this honestly, you could potentially think about using healing runes, but this is something so odd which is currently not represented in a meta game and influenced by so many modifiers that you would pretty much have to give it a try. And the safest way to maximize your potential over runes and sigils is still to build it around your own build, right?
Yeah, to an extent, because it also of course depends, but the thing is that there is 3 cap points in a 5v5 map. If you run a strategy of basically moving around the entire map, then there is gonna be a lot of 2v2, a lot of 3v3, a lot of 1-on-1s. So it's not gonna be that 4v4 in general always. Maybe on Legacy that's more common to have a 4v4 man fight, manslaughter in the middle, but still in this fight, you see, in this meta, you still see Mesmer Thieves hunting DPS Guardian Thieves or skirmishing around the big point. So that those bunkers or whatever, they still have a hard time reaching your skirmishing players that are surrounding the fight rather than being in its epitome.
This is also one of the most common misconceptions if you talk about SPVP in general. I see definitely the motivation behind supportive builds, but think about it, you have 5 players in a team, right? So it's almost like playing a MOBA on an MMO scale, because there's a lot about ganking, a lot about shifting lanes, if you will, and therefore the builds itself should be very well running on their own. And this is probably also maybe the reason why bunker guards aren't that often represented lately, simply because they don't work so well autonomously, except for capping, but that's probably another story.
Yeah, it is. I mean, bunker guard also has a role in certain situations, but it's still only about what situation is gonna occur in your next game. What are you gonna fight? Where do you think your bunker guard will end up? Maybe you misrotated this bunker guard and he is in a 1-on-1 for 2 minutes, slightly dying almost over time because he's facing a Condi engineer. I don't know. But then that advantage of having the bunker guard versus then, let's say, three Zerkers, power Zerkers, that the bunker guard is kind of good, supporting that 4v4, 3v3. That situation never occurred. Then you might as well put that bunker guard on a cheese or an engineer or a shot or even a DDL. So it's all about where are you gonna
have your place. You know, where do you think that the situation is going to occur? Where do you think that fight is going to occur? That's the builds themselves. But then we have the day form and how skilled you are in 2v2s, etc. How well synergized you are with your teammate to actually win the fight. You can't only judge by a build, they won because of this build or whatever. You can counter to an extent, of course. If you have an equal good day form, equal, let's say, equal fast reaction time, and you played equally everything, you know, then of course, maybe the guy that had protection versus the Zerk facing the other team that didn't have protection, you know, versus power, still lose, you know. Of course, it is like that, but it's a lot of factors that, make your win or loss, so to say.
Allow me to compile this down again. I think there's so much valuable information all hidden in between these sentences, and I'm give it a try and try to sum up what we just learned. So first off, if I try to make a new team or a build happen, it would be very wise to simply orient along the meta, especially or namely with meta builds. The second thing you should probably do is balance out your composition. It's okay to have more offensive players or more defensive players, but you should have both defensive and offensive players, simply because they have both their strengths and, you know, weaknesses, which can be countered by step 3, the enemy lineup. Think about which comps you could potentially face and decide on that. If you decide to run 3 Mesmers, you will always have a hard time against thieves, simply because they will counter you, or offensive guards, and you have to take this into consideration. Balance this. Think about maybe implementing an offensive guard to cover the Mesmer or something like that.
Yes.
Fourth step, as far as I understood, try it out. You can do as much theory crafting as you want to, but as you said, that's theory after all. So try it out, modify it, try it out again, until you fit something which, 5, fits your synergy. Maybe the setup you are currently playing on Orange Logo works perfectly fine, but if you apply the same setup to, let's say, for example, TCG, it would never work out, simply because these guys don't really like the positions, the characters, the builds, and therefore the synergy between these players doesn't really line up, right?
Yeah, to an extent.
And last part, think aggro-centrical. And by this may sound a bit irrational, but if you build up a build or try to modify it, think about how this could improve your own build rather than other builds. There are a few expectations, but I think, for example, about the runes and things, you outlined them very well, because there could potentially be something, but you have to go into detail and think about it twice before making a decision in that regard, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially the build, it's the build around the sigils and the runes. Now, spec itself is kind of another story, but the thing is that we have tried a lot of things in this game at the moment, so before the big patch hits with a lot of changes, that's, I think you should still at the moment follow the meta and grab these builds that have already been so developed and evolved through different metas. But that doesn't change the fact that meta is only created by some, let's say, high-tier teams that played something and won the big tournament, and then that became the meta. That does not mean that there is not a counter or so, because I think that's the misconception most people do, is that this is strong and it's the strongest. Yes, to an extent, you know, Engineer, it has a lot of stuff. So does Shout War, and you know, we know that, but that doesn't change the fact that you can spike a Shout Wall. That doesn't change the fact that
you can spike an engineer. You know, that doesn't change the fact that a necro aids has, if he gets an opening on this engineer, he's dead. You know, there is always going to be that, even though the engine itself is very strong. You know, you dislike it as playing a lot of the different stuff, and one-on-one's very strong, etc. But there's always going to be that kind of countering perspective to Guild Wars. I always saw Guild Wars as stone, paper, scissors in a way, but it requires time as well as, you know, dedication, and we've had it and we have it. But yeah, it's, of course, if we threw this game to the South Koreans, they would maybe even invest more time, and we would probably see the top 2 teams have a versatile, adaptive composition, I'm sure. Or at least if we put the most dedicated people into it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that's something super exciting about this game, or speaking about metas in general. For example, Condition, Necros, as not speaking about Doomfire, they didn't really got nerfed to a point where there wasn't really a value to them. However, simply because of the fact that there are so many shoutbows out there, Condition meta is currently negated by them.
Yes,
and
definitely.
It shifts and shifts again until something new is established, which counters, for example, shoutbows, and so on. And this keeps it moving and gives you never 100% correct approach. If the game would be totally static, numerically balanced like StarCraft, sooner or later tactics get established and bang, you have this 100% correct approach where every wiggle room would cost you the benefit, right?
Yes.
So I don't know if you wanted to include something on the build craft, but I think we covered so much topics.
Yeah,
we did. We
did. We can keep going.
That I would recommend that we have some other topics up there. One thing I wondered, for example, you speak about trying out a lot of things, trying out new builds. How do you guys practice? How does Orange Logo practice and try to get better on a higher level? How do you guys do that? Do you simply play Hotshine, or what's up?
No, I mean, the only real thing that you can practice with, I mean, every team has their ups and downs in practice, especially because, you know, after Boston we slacked a lot. I must admit, we slacked incredibly a lot, and we didn't really keep up. So, you know, we got a few losses here and there, and now we lost decently recently. And, you know, but that doesn't matter. What matters for us is that you analyze every single game and what opponents you have. And practicing is basically, you can only do it versus good players. So the biggest practice for us have been a weekly tournament with the best teams. More than that, and usually then it has only been 1 or maybe 2, if we're lucky, that actually, you know, gave us a run. And having only this amount to give us a run for it is kind of course, frustrating, because you don't really evolve yourself. But the only way you can really train for us is to scrim the opponent best, or the best opponents. Especially teams. That is our only practice opportunity, and of course dueling in each other to find out what is strong versus what. This we have done a lot.
Pardon if I interrupt you, but by scrimming you mean, for people who aren't familiar with the terminology, inviting these people over to your custom arena and playing 5 versus 5 matches against very high ranked.
Yes, you can play Legacy 3 times in a row. It doesn't matter. You play whatever, and you just try stuff. You don't care about the win or the loss. All you care about is certain movements. What is strong versus what? What happened here? Did we lose because we lost this fight because of mechanical issues, or that we played bad here, or that we didn't, or the enemy played incredible here, or did we lose because of these matchups that we had here? Was it because of that combo the enemy had? It's too strong for what we are using, etc. It's all these different aspects that you need to take in consideration or how you evaluate your fighting performance. Yeah.
So just to sum this up, you would highly recommend to get as soon as possible into ESL, into weekly tournaments, something which is renowned for example, prizes or rewards or whatever, and therefore you will probably get smacked weeks and weeks again, but you will establish yourself and get better and therefore get good practice, right?
Definitely, definitely.
Second thing, skirmishes if you can. Third thing, duel a lot, right?
Yes.
So I think I would highly recommend this to anyone who can do this. But let's say, for example, I have a team which has only 3 mates or 4 mates. How do we practice? We can't really, we could duel, of course, but we couldn't scrim, but we couldn't do ESL tournaments or tournaments in general, not. What would you recommend for people who can't really establish this manpower?
And you still, but your goal is still to have a 5-man.
So,
I guess.
So
but you mean
get the 5th man, okay?
Get the 5th. Yes, that is your goal. But if you wanna practice without having that 5th, then get a stand-in and practice with that stand-in and try a new stand-in. Then you try a new, or whoever is a potential candidate. Just keep trying because that's the game. It's 5 versus 5. It's gonna be an ESL weekly tournament where you should have 5 men. But stand-ins are never wrong necessarily. They may even be stronger if they know their stuff even better. But they of course need a synergy with you. But your goal must always be to find the 5-man. But then if you still want to practice without having 5 men, then you should of course do rank queue together, even on TeamSpeak. Even if you don't face that coordinated people, or if you face coordinated people, it's still practice. And also duel a lot. Duel the matchups that you want to be able to take and beat, etc.
I expected to simply go, yeah, do rank queue, but go for the 5th man according to ROM and simply try it. And if you can't get the 5th man into your team as a, basic player, you can ask friends to join in simply to get this practice, get into ESL and get a taste of this high standard play, right?
Yes, definitely.
How important is communication to you?
It's a lot. I mean, sometimes some games you have felt it actually depends. I mean, as I've noticed along my past years, like when I was younger, I was still a very skilled player. I was probably even more reaction fast when I was 14. But I've noticed along the years that it's a lot about mentality. It's a lot about how your teammates are feeling, if they have that form of the day. It's very important because it affects not only your own gameplay. Let's say you have a bad mentality, something happened, you are tired or whatever, you're not really focused on ending game. That if you're, let's say, a leader type, or one of the biggest communication sources in your team during your fight, then that may be a severe impact on your entire team's performance, because that's the guy that's supposed to be active all the time, etc. We are humans, so we always have these days or whatever, these times and hours that we feel not fully in game or have that ultimate form. But mentality is a lot, so make sure to sleep and feel good before tournament as well. Not necessarily feel good, but you understand what I mean. Like, be calm about your fight. It doesn't matter if you lose a weekly, just keep at it and never lose your mentality in a game. Even if you lost a fight, I've seen so many good players, they lose a fight and they lose their entire momentum or mentality because they lost one fight. And I noticed already they play worse and they do worse rotation only because we won this fight twice in a row. That doesn't change the 7 upcoming fights that can be won for them, but we won 3 for free because of their bad mentality. So try to always keep your mentality up. It doesn't matter if you lose or lost a fight or something wrong happens. Next move. What is the next move?
Yeah, I think this is something that doesn't get told very much, but if someone happens to spectate a lot of the games you're performing with Orange Logo, or especially World Tournament Series are a very good example on that. What I really like about the performance of your team in general is that you stay active over the whole game. Even if it looks very grim, you don't get less dangerous over the course of time. And I didn't really expect something other than that you would definitely recommend that motivation is key. Motivation is half the battle.
Yes.
Try to not negate any, pull your teammates down. Even if you feel like, I don't know, if you have a bad day, I would recommend keep it for yourself. It's okay.
Yes.
Don't have to be godlike all
Exactly.
day long.
You do that after the game, and barely after the game. Not if it's a serious tournament like WTS, and that's why, for example, like we have never played the way we did at WTS, where we're to be fair, it was about more money than the entire Go 4 has ever been in total. So this win was everything for us, and I was so incredibly proud for all of my teammates, Zapdos, Frey, Denshi, myself, Tage. I was so incredibly proud for all of them because nobody, not one single word basically, I think maybe one sentence during what, 8 games, that was, oh shit, I should have done that, or that should have happened, or shouldn't have happened. But there was only, okay, we went down here, only the next move, what is going on here, we regroup, we take the next step, take the next move, no unconstructive whine, nothing of this sort, and keeping up that hype, you know, as soon as you get a kill, it doesn't matter if it's the game one, you know, or fight one, as soon as you get that kill, you hype that motherfucker, you keep killing, you know, you keep at it, because it's such a helper to be able to hype your team into that moral, you know, into that even harder focus to slay the other guy, you know, and keep at it. Don't let them move away, you know, don't ever stand in the corner now resting yourself because you got a kill and feel good about it. Don't feel good, you know, keep at it. Keep your focus going. And if you do this as a team, you're gonna be strong, even if you don't have the, let's say, quotation marks, strongest players. You're gonna be strong just by a full mentality and a synergy. Yeah.
However, we've come to an end, and according to my clock, which doesn't have an alarm function, unfortunately. First of all, thank you. I think I personally learned a lot today, and I think there's so much value in speaking about the build craft, because builds in itself, in speaking about a 5-man comp, isn't really that much of a topic currently, and I think this sheds a lot of light on that. Is there something you would like to add?
No, not necessarily. I think we caught a lot of stuff.
Definitely. So, if there is nothing you would like to add, I would like to thank you again for taking the time, and I wish you all the best of luck in the future upcoming World Tournament Series, of course. I'm looking forward to see you in Cologne, so don't map this up for me.
Yeah, we'll try our best. We'll see what happens.
You can of course find a link to Rom's Twitch channel and every necessary thing you could imagine if you want to follow him around. I can highly recommend to check him out if you fancy to see some good gameplay. Thanks again, Rom.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Hey, and as always, thanks for watching and good luck, have fun.
Keep mentality up, lads.